Today, we're going to trace a single ancient decision that has kind of quietly shaped our world for thousands of years. Think of it as the arc of choice.
So let's just start with a really big question. What if there's one fundamental choice, made over and over again from ancient history to our modern economies, that's basically the operating system running underneath it all?
And this is the choice, right here, in its simplest form. On one side, you've got a world seen through the lens of scarcity, fear, and control. And on the other, a world that's rooted in abundance, trust, and generosity. Honestly, everything we're about to explore hangs on the tension between these two ways of seeing things.
So where does this whole thing begin? Well, that brings us to Section 1. A choice is presented. We're going from this wide-open world to a single fateful tree.
You know, the story doesn't start with a bunch of rules, but with possibility. In the beginning, God brings all these animals to the first human, Adam, just to see what he would name them. It's an act of co-creation, right? An invitation to just improvise. The world starts out as a gift, not some kind of test. But then, a very specific choice gets introduced. And it's not really about the fruit, it's about trust versus mistrust. It's the choice to receive something as a gift versus the urge to grasp for it yourself. And the turning point, the real pivot, is when the situation gets reframed as one of scarcity, this idea that, hey, God is holding out on you. And in that moment of doubt, fear wins out over trust.
So this first choice, it then scales way up. Welcome to Section 2, Law, Life, and Death. Now it's not just a personal decision anymore. It's become a binding covenant for an entire people with huge societal consequences.
And it could not be more explicit. This quote from Deuteronomy is such a pivotal moment. The choice is just laid bare. I have set before you life and good, death and evil. Therefore, choose life. You see, it's not a subtle temptation in a garden anymore. It's a national mandate.
Now this is a really crucial point. The Hebrew words here for good and evil, tov and ra, they have this double meaning. They aren't just about abstract moral right and wrong. No, they're also about concrete, real-world outcomes. Ecological and economic prosperity on one hand, or total disaster and collapse on the other. The choice has tangible, on-the-ground consequences.
So what does choosing life actually look like in practice? Well, the Torah lays out a pretty clear system. It all starts with trusting in divine provision. And that trust leads to these incredible practices like Sabbath and Jubilee, which are these radical economic resets. From there, it requires upholding justice for the most vulnerable. And the result, the outcome of this path, is flourishing and abundance for everyone.
Okay, the story takes another turn now. Section 3, the radical reframing. The focus starts to pivot from just external actions to the internal orientation of the heart.
This is when the prophets, figures like Isaiah and Jeremiah, they show up with this really stark warning. They saw a society hoarding wealth and making political alliances for safety, and they called it out. They basically said, you think this leads to life, but you're actually choosing death. For them, injustice wasn't just breaking a rule. It was literally tearing the fabric of creation apart.
And then Jesus arrives, and he essentially boils this entire history down into one piercing question for everyone he meets. What logic are you living by? Which operating system is running your life?
So the first operating system he identifies is the logic of empire. It's kind of our default mode, right? And it's built on that same old foundation of scarcity and fear. You hoard to live, you fear outsiders, you dominate to survive. He called this the broad road, the one that seems right, but it actually leads to ruin.
But the alternative he presents is completely upside down, the logic of the kingdom. You have to lose your life to find it. You forgive crippling debts. You love your enemies. The whole idea is that true, abundant life is found not in grasping for more, but in giving yourself away.
So, where is all of this heading? That brings us to Section 4, Freedom and Final Witness. Let's dig into what this choice ultimately means.
The Apostle Paul comes along and radically redefines freedom here. It isn't our modern idea of just, doing whatever I want. Instead, it's about being restored to our full capacity to respond generously to others and to the world around us. It's the freedom to love, not just freedom from rules. Big difference.
This long arc of choice reaches its climax in the book of Revelation with these two symbolic figures, the two witnesses. They stand as a final testament to this entire story, representing the consistency of both the law and the prophets.
And their testimony puts the two choices side by side one last time. The empire promises life through control, and it kills to preserve its order. In total contrast, the Lamb offers life through trust and self-giving. And yeah, for a moment, the empire appears to win. But the final twist shows that its power is just an illusion. The way of generosity is the one that ultimately leads to real life.
So, what does this ancient pattern mean for us? This brings us to our final section, our choice today. How does this all play out in our modern world?
I mean, when you map out the whole arc, you see this incredible pattern emerge. What starts with a simple choice about grasping in Genesis evolves into national laws, then a cry for justice from the prophets, and finally a clash of logics with Jesus. It's the same fundamental choice, just deepening at every single stage.
And here's why this matters right now. The argument is that this isn't just some ancient story. It's the operating system that is still running beneath our economies, our politics, and yeah, even our personal lives. We are constantly choosing between these two logics, whether we realize it or not.
And here it is, translated for today. The scarcity logic, it shows up as hoarding resources, dominating others, and excluding the stranger. The abundance logic, on the other hand, leads to generosity, rhythms of rest, like the Sabbath, and this relentless pursuit of justice. One leads to collapse, the other leads to a life that actually multiplies.
So after this whole journey, what's the final message? In the end, this path doesn't offer a command or a threat. It just poses a question to a world that seems stuck in the logic of empire.
They just stand there and pose a question. And it's not a command, it's an invitation, a question that echoes all the way from Genesis to our present moment. Is there another way?